All right, welcome to our April 21st Stop 5G Smart Meter Litigation Group meeting. And we're going to answer some questions today and just have a discussion on where everybody's at in the process and what is going on. And Stan is here. Hi, Stan.
Hello. Thank you to everybody that joined the meeting.
Hello.
So Stan's gone over in the prior meetings all of the documentation for the packages to be sent out that you can print and send out to start the notice process, and then that would turn into what you would file for your actual case. And so we're talking with Gina and Helen, who are over in Australia, and they're really on it right now. Helen's been sending out documents, and I think that you guys sent out, have you sent out one of the big packages, or just
No, we printed two. Jeannie's got one, and that's been binded at my work, and I printed up one, and we were just that question came up with my partner about the USB. Could we maybe put the big document on a USB with the template and print that up and modify it to us, and then register mail that all together, so they, in the letter, they know what the contents will be. Sorry, I might just mute myself again whilst Linda's talking.
One of the issues when you send out something like that on a USB stick is you're going to rely on the other side to actually trust you to put that thing in your computer. There could be a virus on it, could be who knows what on it, right? So a lot of people are a little apprehensive about shoving a USB stick with God knows what on it, because nobody knows, into a computer, because if it blows their computer up, they're going to wish they'd never seen you. So most people won't necessarily do that. And the other thing that you have to rely on is maybe they're in office and they have set designated programs on their computer, and that's all they can use. Their administrator can lock them out of being able to open certain files or even go to certain directories. Maybe they can't even access their USB drive. So one of the problems when you send out something on a USB stick is not only does the person have to shove it in their computer, they actually have to be able to access the program required to read it. So if you send them, for example, like PDF file, most people should be able to open a PDF. But what if their system administrators lock them out and says, the only thing you can use here at work are these 4 programs that we use, and that's it? Then, although they've got your document, they never read the darn thing. And secondly, you might get somebody at work that knows nothing about computers, and they know how to run the 4 programs that's there from their boss, and that's it. And as far as the Word file, some people use WordPerfect, some people use Word, some people use OpenOffice. Lord knows what they use, right? So when you give them something, the onus is now upon them, according to you, in order to open this file. Well, if you want to get me to do something, you don't make me do a bunch of work, especially if I'm government, because we all know I'm lazy. So therefore, give them the file so they don't have any excuse why they can't read it. I know it costs you $95 or $100 or whatever it is to print it out and then coil bind it and put covers on it and do all the mailing. But the way I look at it is, you want to win this thing. All they got to do is bring that thumb drive into a court of law and say, here's what we were sent, Your Honor. Now, can you read this? And I've seen this happen. And the judge says, I have no idea what the hell's on that thumb drive. I had one judge tell me he didn't even know what it was. I brought it up to him. I said, it's a thumb drive, a USB stick, we call it. And he says, well, I have no way of knowing what's on that thumb drive. So I don't do it that way. I do it what's required in court. You look in a court case, any court file, any courtroom, what's in there? Not a whole pile of thumb drives, I'll tell you that. There's a whole pile of paperwork. So unfortunately, we have to follow the rule. Because if we have the paper in 2 copies, as I originally specified, you can mail one out, and then you can keep the other one. And if you have to do it, you can reprint the front page of the one letter. And you can say, Your Honor, I sent the same document. The only thing that changes was the letter, right, as to where it was directed. And so that's how you have to do. I know it's a little bit expensive, but you can imagine the amount of work that went through to make it, right? And if the guy doesn't read it or can't read it for whatever reason, or he says your thumb drive's defective or USB didn't work, some other BS excuse, you wasted your time sending that thing out. That's why I specify do it with paper, then they got no excuse. Because what we're doing is we're actually heating up the feet of the government and telling them you're going to get royally railed over here legally if you don't do something. So they're going to find any excuse they can. Thumb drive didn't work. Computer doesn't have USB access for security reasons. We don't have the software. We have an incompetent operator. The operator is not permitted to use those programs, whatever the case may be. So
Yeah.
kindly do it the way I specified. It makes it a lot easier.
It was just an idea that was given to
Yep, I get
by
it.
my partner, you know, and I just thought, well, that is a great idea. So just to save costs,
Yep, I know. The other thing that some people have said is, well, I'll post the PDF file on the internet, right? And then the guy can download it. Well, what if, like, I used to work for the Hastings County Board Office, and I worked in the computer supply department, and I fixed computers. That was my basically I worked in an electronics place. And we had to limit the kids so they couldn't get access to certain stuff, right? So we fixed it so they couldn't access certain websites. An employer or a government entity may do the same thing. Okay, so if you give them a link, now the onus is on them to follow your paperwork. Well, they don't have time for that, or they can't do it, or they don't know how to do it, or they don't have access to it. So we run into the same problem. Kindly just send them the paperwork the way it was given to you, with the modifications with name, address, and phone number on the Word file, and then they've got no excuse. Because the other way they can say, yeah, we got something, but we were unable to use it, for whatever excuse they want to give you. Even if they do open it, they can say, well, we couldn't open it. We don't know what a PDF file is. I know most of us would be laughing, going, what are you, stupid? But there's people out there that don't know what a PDF file is. But everybody that's in the government should know how to read, I hope. So that's why I say send it out paper. I know it's a pain in the ass, but hey, do you want to get microwaved or do you want to get fixed? And there's another problem, which I didn't bother to throw in that file. But if you take a standard microwave oven, there's 750, 700 watts, whatever, 1,000 watts. If you look at one of them 5G towers, let's just assume that there was 750 watts going to each one of those transmitters. Well, there's usually about 8 of them up there. So now we got 6,400 watts or whatever the heck it is. And these towers are so darn close together. Well, technically, you're microwaving the air, which you can do. I mean, you can go turn a microwave on with nothing in it. It'll get warm. So that's actually leading to global warming, which is a whole other problem, which we didn't even bother to address. I only gave them the basic laws, because if I wanted to do this, I could have gave you over 1,000 documents to prove my point. And I figure if 980 pages isn't sufficient, then no amount will be. And that would be my argument in court. But in court, I can't hand him a thumb drive and say, this is what I gave them, Your Honor. He's going to look at it and go, well, I don't know what the hell's on this. So we have to do it the old-fashioned way, the paper route. Unfortunately, that's the way the court works, and this way we can say this is what we gave him, and there's no disputing anything because it has a registered mail number, all that stuff. The other thing, you could have mailed him a thumb drive with a picture of your cat on it, you know. And Helen, I know you have a cat because I've seen him walk by. There's no way to know what was given.
Yeah.
So we have to do it the old-fashioned way, unfortunately.
Mm.
The file is too darn big. It's 106 megs, I think.
Yeah.
Too darn big to mail the one file. And even if you took the one file out, just the one for the government, and I don't know what the number is, but it's probably around 50 megs. Most people's mailboxes are capped off at between 8 and maybe 50. You might be able to email it, but I highly doubt it. And then you got to rely on the fact that it didn't go into the spam box. The guy actually opened it, you know. So just avoid all of that, pardon my English, bullshit, and send him the paper copy, and he's got it. But what we need you to do is to send us back the email.
I can't find any information on that car.
Right? We need you to send back to that email address your registered mail number. Once we get that, then we can trace your package and then do the next thing if we have to.
So Sam, there was an idea, I have an idea to maybe create a support letter. You know, if we have a group in one town and it's been so difficult to get other people to join in. So say I send a package in my hometown to my governor. Now
Yep.
I'm prepared to take on the whole costs of the lawsuit and everything that follows because I'm my own self right now. And now I'm going to look for some more people in my area that want to work with me. And would there be a way that we could do like a support letter? Like it would make it a lot easier for the people that are joining with, like in a local group, say they just want to add their voice and support to that package. So would would that be something? I know that it in a perfect world we would like 150 people in every town or for every state or province, or you know
Yep.
150 people to be sending these packages in. That would be the best thing. You know, if then we only have one person in a region that sends it, then how can we make it maybe easier for people to support it by sending in maybe just a letter, a one-page letter that references that document in the actual delivery data and stuff like that. So it says, you know, we're putting our support, we know, you know, with this document that was sent to you. Is that, what do you think about that?
You can do that as a follow-up, and that's what we have to do because people are too damn slow. Unfortunately, like we had 2 months originally to do this. Today's the 21st. At the end of this month, our time will have been expired as far as stopping this before it goes into third reading and it'll become law. But we can still object to it because the law can be overturned. It's not what we want to do, but people are slow, so we're going to have to work with the slow people. What we can do is you can file that letter, but if you file it on behalf of everybody and only you do it, you're a target because face it, you're the only squeaky wheel in the equation here, so you become a target. If you don't give a crap, which I don't, because if I did, I wouldn't do half the crap I do. Then you just you do what you do, right? You send the letter in, and what you can do then is you now remember I told you guys the clock was ticking. I used to show you a picture of a clock, so the clock is ticking. Once those letters go out, okay, and I'm not waiting for you because if you don't do it, I don't care. I'm going to give you till the end of the month. If that document isn't in the government's hands, I don't care, right? Because I can't wait for you forever. But we have 1 year from the basically end of this month to bring that lawsuit in front of a judge because the law says we only have a year to do it. Once you knew you were injured, okay, and injured doesn't mean bleeding to death. Injured just means you've been done wrong. Once you were injured, you have a year or 365 days to bring this claim into court. So remember, this clock was ticking. You got 1 year basically, less probably about 6 months, 4 months if you want to really push the window, to get these people on board. And what you do is you have them, sign up, pay you $10 or whatever it is. Give the guy a donation. I don't care if it's $5, $2, whatever the hell you can afford, and because they did that for you, you can then put their name on the statement of claim, right? Because right now you're just acting as the front person. Now, I didn't run this past Whitney. I haven't talked to her this week. She's been hiding on me. If you wanted to, you could write like Many Hands Unified. You could have a global movement and have different detachments in each little province or state or territory or country, right? And then what we can do later is we can say, okay, we've already done the letter thing. Those that were going to do it did it. Those that didn't do it, well, you do it later whenever you get around to it. And if you don't get around to it, welcome to the world of microwave. Nothing I can do for you. But if you do something, then if you sign up, you can become on a members list, which will be confidential because we sure as heck don't need anybody being a target, right? But when the time comes, those people that donated, we ask them a question. Where do you live? Right? Where's your state? This is why we wanted that master list where all the towers were, okay? Because then we could complain and gripe and squeak about every one of the towers in those areas, and the people that were there, right, the members that actually did what I told them, which was none, but if they had done it, we could say, okay, these people got a legitimate beef, right? They're next to this tower, it's next to their work, next to their school, next to their shopping mall, I don't care where, whatever. Then we could say we want those towers removed. And like you said earlier, Helen was saying, somebody just filed a petition and got rid of the tower. Well, those 3 towers that are next to this workplace, guess what I'd be doing? I would go over and I would see if they have a legitimate, valid permit with a safety assessment study, because that's required by law. I already explained that to you. If they don't, go to your city hall and say these towers can't be put here. It doesn't have the safety requirement study, and it doesn't comply with the FCC rulings, which have already happened when we covered that in the previous call. Those towers will have to be shut down right then and there. There's no sense in building something that you can't use, right? So I would, and if they keep building it, then you got to have to take the city now. The city's now on the hook because you told them there was a problem. You gave them, oh yeah, the legal document you didn't want to print out, and they got no damn excuse. So they're knowingly putting you in harm's way. Now, there's a thing in the criminal code, and it applies to the UK, and it applies to Australia, applies to Canada, and it applies to the US. The US is a little harder, but it doesn't matter. That we can make it fit. If the government is doing something wrong, knowingly doing something wrong, you're not allowed to play or pay into a criminal enterprise. So somebody that's knowingly doing you harm, to me, is a criminal enterprise. That gives you excuse to withdraw your taxes. And you don't just arbitrarily do what everybody else would do and say, well, I'm not paying your taxes. You turn around and bring that into the court of law, and that's one of your things that you're seeking in your remedy. If they're not going to protect my rights, why the hell am I playing into a criminal enterprise when the law says I'm not supposed to do that? Therefore, I don't want to have to pay taxes. I want that as part of my order. Now it's going to affect the city on a financial level. Well, holy shit. Are we going to have 40 people not paying their taxes? Are we going to shut that piece of junk down for a tower? And here's the damages and the harmful effects. So they can no longer plead ignorant. That's where we were going with that. And if they still want to push beyond that, then we can actually get our own government. We need 150 people in each state or province if you have provinces. This is a lot bigger than you guys knew about, but that's where it's going. That's why I want to do it in paper. I don't want these people to have some kind of BS. Even if they could do it, they'll come up with some BS excuse. I couldn't read it. PDF files, reader wasn't installed. Who knows, right? We don't want to have any of those problems. So that's why I said do it a certain way. Now, once this happens at the end of the month, okay, come the end of this month, hopefully, well, who knows, but hopefully many people have turned around and sent in their tracking numbers to manyhandsunified@gmail.com. Because once they do that, then we know where they are. Now, we will do your work for you because you people, most of them don't want to do it or they forget about it or whatever. We'll go back and we'll check and trace each one of these letters, and we gave them 35 days. So in 35 days from the end of this month, they will have deemed to have received their letter. Then we have to go back to you people and say, okay, did they heed the warning or do we have to go to court? Right? And when we go to court, the judge is you got to file your paperwork. What did you serve them? Well, again, we got to go back to that file. Remember the file? They said print out 2 copies. You're going to have to copy 1 more copy because you sure as heck don't want to give away your original. And you're going to say, this is what I filed based on this law, and here's what I want for a judgment. Now, the judgment, because nobody knows, the judgment's $1 million per person per infraction. I've already talked to a few judges and corporate people, and I talked to the clerks of the court, and they said you can go for $1 million claim. That's not a problem. So everybody that goes through this crap is going to get $1 million claim. Now, if it's not worth $150 to mail that letter out, sorry, there's no free lunch. Right? The hard work's already been done for you. All you got to do is hit Control P. Pretty straightforward.
Well, I thought it'd be super useful if groups had some way of binding their packages too. Like a lot of people do have their own binder type setups where you can punch the holes in the documents and put the Surlock binding on.
Yep.
So that would also be a positive thing if for the groups, individual groups, if they could do that together.
You can buy a coil binding machine at Staples, Kinko's, those places. And you can buy the machine. Now, if there is going to do, like you said, Whitney, where we have one central person for, like, let's say you're for BC, okay? If the people either want to pay you to do it, or that's what I offered originally, but nobody took me up on it, or B, they can mail it to Staples. You can mail a PDF file to Staples or one of the print shops. They usually have some way to do it, or if they don't, you walk in with a thumb drive, and they don't care. They will put it in their computer, and you can have them print the thing and coil bind it. Now, if you have a printer of your own, and if your person wanted, if you buy one of those coil binders, they're about $300. But if the person that was in charge of the group, let's just say Whitney, for example, notice how we're leaning on you today. Anyway, if you had one of those coil binder things, people could get the thing printed and then bring you the document, and you could coil bind it for them because they paid you that $10 fee or whatever that fee was. And all that, you're not making any money with the $10 fee. If you think of the amount of work that you do, and then you got to put up the website and answer emails and all that, you're not making anything. You might as well go back to sleep. But this is not for profit. We're not doing this for a profit.
Yeah, it's not. Most of the donations that come in would go to alleviate the costs of actually doing it. Yeah, it's not about making a profit.
No, when I first printed this thing out, I printed out 64 copies. That's what I did, because I said, well, there's a governor in each state, and there's 50 states, and then we got 12 provinces, right? And then I wanted one spare copy for me, so 50 plus 12, I ended up with about 64 copies when I was done. So you can imagine what my printer was doing.
Yeah, well,
But then what I do is I
to,
bring it down to a print shop and I have them coil bind it.
yeah, I binded it, but I had to do it in 2 parts. I couldn't bind it. My binder would only do the half of it, so I got 2 and 2 for Gina.
Yep. Now what I do in that case, if I'm going to submit it in court, is I do book 1 of 2, book 2 of 2. And I usually separate it somewhere, like, if there's 12 exhibits and I'm going to do 2 books, I'll do 1 through 6 and then 7 through 12.
Yep.
With a cover sheet, because if you don't have a cover sheet, they get squirrely on you. That's how the courts work around here anyway.
Yeah.
Yep. And they don't like the metal ones. That's why I said use Surlocks, because those metal ones, they snag on stuff. And
yeah, I've got the Surlocks.
Yep. It's a bit of a pain in the ass. It is. I agree with it. But this is what the courts are going to require, so you might just as well do it right the first time. Because otherwise, let's say that guy has to bring something in and he has to, say you emailed a thumb drive and they did happen to put it in a computer. Hallelujah. I mean, at least they did it. But now that you're expecting them to print out your file so they can go through it or read it on a screen. You're wanting them to help you fight your case. Like, are you on a new planet? That doesn't work that way. You got to make it as easy as you can for the other side to do it, so they have no excuse not to do it. And that's why I said do it the right way. Right?
Yeah,
Once they get
agree.
the file,
yeah,
they can't
I
say
do
nothing.
agree. I do agree, but it's like I said, it's $100 just to get it binded, and then you've got to get it weighed and sent, and it costs me $167 to mail to register mail 31 letters, just normal 2-page letter with a stamped self-addressed reply for them to reply back.
Yep.
And that was $167 just to do that. So to register mail that one 960-page document in Australia is going to cost, it's going to cost a lot.
Yep.
For what,
if you get it printed commercially downtown here, at least they charge you about 10 cents a sheet. Now, if somebody wanted to do this, they could do what I did. If the head of each group wanted to do it, right, the person could buy a laser printer if they had enough members, and they can print it for probably 2 or 3 cents a sheet. But your printer is going to get one heck of a workout doing this.
Yeah, well, I've got a laser printer, but it doesn't, it's a big Ricoh. It's a second-hand one that we were given, our company was given, and that doesn't like to print double-sided, as I would have used that. But I've had to use our brother, which is ink, and just for that one document took 3 hours for mine and 3 hours for Gina to print up.
Oh, hello.
It might have been faster to go to a Kinko's or some Staples or one of them places. But then you're paying them guys, so
Exactly.
it's a catch-22, right?
Yeah. So I'd have to look at costings, to be honest, to find out what that document's going to cost to get it register mail, because it's Australia is a big place, so
It
we're
is,
not
yeah.
just sending it down the. We're not just sending it down the road. It's not like I can get in my car and go and hand it to them in person or anything. It's yeah.
Pat's asked me to contact you.
Oh, I
Is
better
that,
turn me off. Sorry, she's on the phone.
No worries.
Yeah.
That's the other reason why I said print the thing double-sided when you send it to them, because if you print it double-sided, in essence, you've used half the paper. The sad part that really, really sucks is when you go to file it in court, because they don't want double-sided paper.
Good morning and good evening to our friends in Canada. My name's Con. I've just been listening to the discussion this morning. I have much to do, but I thought I'd listen in the background for a little while. Stan, hello there. May I ask you please if you could describe for me a little a little more the foundation, the cause of action that you hope to employ when you lodge these documents, because I'm a general practitioner, a solicitor here in South Australia, and I did have a look at the documents that were sent to me by good friend Phil and Max, and also I've had a little communication with Gina this morning and last night. It's my hope that I can perhaps translate the documents for use in Australian courts, or even more specifically, like provinces in Canada, the state of South Australia, as opposed to Queensland or New South Wales or Victoria. So would you be able to explain a little for me about the cause of action? I understand you've got a notice of liability, which is essentially telling the potential defendant that they are on notice, they've done something wrong, they are liable. And I also note that the documents mention trespass. Would you care to speak a little further on the actual underlying law and how who would be the advocate, who would be the person who stands up in court? How do they get paid? How do they get read into the matter so that they can they can represent you individually or a group?
Okay, if you look at that document, there's, depending on which version of it you're using, depending on what it's for,
Yeah.
there's a 16-page Word document, and if you
That's
read
right.
that document, it tells you there's certain exhibits, 1 through 12, 1 through 13, whatever it is. Each
Excellent,
one of
yes.
those exhibits is an actual law. Like there's the IEEE, which is the International Electrical Engineers, whatever the last E stands for.
Yes.
And it talks about dirty electricity and harmonics. Well, when you transmit a signal or you use a smart meter, okay, there's two different things that happen. The smart meter, because of the switch mode power supply, contributes to dirty electricity, which causes a health effect. Okay, so that's already covered. I mean, if you want me to explain it, you'll just have to read the law. I mean, that's their law. The second thing is, another one of their laws in there, it talks about a Sutros Tower study, okay, which was an actual AM, FM, I think it was UHF, VHF, tower, and they said anybody within 5 miles of that tower has adverse health effects, everything from high blood pressure to high cholesterol, you name it. Okay, there's a whole host of problems. So that's in there. That's the second one of the other exhibits. A third exhibit, it tells you under U.S. code, okay, that the government can't use people for an experiment. It's under Title 50. It's included. So you have to read that law too. Then there's another 3 court cases that happened under the FCC, which is the Federal Communications Commission. And the Federal Communications Commission, I covered this on the last call, they went to court and they said, well, you know, we don't care about the rules and we want to be able to just put these towers wherever we want. And the District of Columbia Court, which is technically Washington, D.C., or just, you know, it's technically United States, said, well, you can put the tower someplace, but you have to ensure that there's a safety assessment study done and that it's not going to cause any adverse health effects. They didn't like that answer, so they said no. They appealed it, so it went to a court the second time. And the second time, the judge comes back, says, nope, I don't care. You still have to make sure the safety assessment study is done and that it's not going to cause any adverse health effects. So that was the third case. Now, based on that, we have 3 different cases. We have the Title 50 of the U.S. Code, which means the Federal Communications Commission, which is U.S. based, is violating that law. Then we have the Sutros Tower study, which proves it's doing harmful effects. Then we have the IEEE standards. And then we also have another standard, which is C95.1, which talks about the health effects of wireless. And then we also have about 150 letters approximately from medical people that are saying, yes, wireless technology is harmful. So I can't explain that to you. You have to read those PDF file or that big PDF with all the exhibits. If you don't, I don't mean to be, indignant or anything, but if you don't understand those documents, then you're probably not equipped to be able to fight this in court. I understand them
Yes,
because I've been dealing with law for 30 years. So anybody
absolutely.
that's, first or second year law student should be able to go through it. Now, the purpose of the letter, the letter side of it, which is the Word document, explains, if you read everything that's in there, it explains what each one of those exhibits does. Why is it here? What's it for? And so they're all transpired. Now, the hope is, okay, that anytime when you have a legal dispute, you hope to try and settle your differences out of court. As a lawyer,
That's
like
right.
most lawyers, they don't necessarily care. But
Yeah.
as the end user, the guy that's footing the bill, you do care. Because if you can settle this thing outside of court, you're a lot better off. You're not paying some lawyer to file paperwork in court. And most lawyers, no offense to anybody, do not do the amount of work that I have done to prove my case. And I haven't scratched the surface. I mean, in essence, I've got 12 or 13 documents, which are the exhibits. But in actual reality, I've got over 1,069 documents that prove I'm right. But rather than bring you a tractor trailer load full of evidence, if the 13 exhibits don't prove it, which are usable in international law because it's the IEEE, which is good everywhere in the world, then there's not much hope for you, right? If international law doesn't fix it, and the reason I used the IEEE and international electrical standards is because I wanted this document usable everywhere. I want to be able to use it in Australia, in Africa, in USA, Canada, UK, Germany, France. Whereas if I just used, well, you're violating the Canadian Criminal Code, just for example, well, what the heck good does that do some guy in the US, right? And if I say, well, you're violating the US code, and I dug a whole bunch of US code out, which I could have done, then it would only be usable in the United States. So what I did was I used international law, and then if I have to go one further, I can go specific and say, okay, well, in addition to those claims that were already made in the 980-page document, they're also violating all these sections of the Canadian Criminal Code and use that for Canada. Or they're all violating these codes under the UK law, so that's the UK, and we can separate them that way. Now, the purpose of the whole document is, like, here's basically what's wrong, basically. Not specifically, but basically. And then if we have to, we can go specifically and nail each individual country or each individual province or each individual state. Now, if you look at U.S. law, you'll find out that most state law is actually a division of the U.S. code. So it's usually very, very similar with minor changes. And it's been adopted at various points in time, and pretty much it's the law, like the state of Michigan, for example. If I look at their basic code, if I was to look at, say, South Carolina, and let's just hypothetically say I was dealing with, I'll call it the Highway Traffic Act, even though that's probably the incorrect name, they're probably similar. But I don't care, because what I can do is I can say, well, the federal law, which is trumps them all, right? Federal law always trumps the state or provincial law. Then I can say, well, you're violating this. And so even though I've used U.S. code, and I did that only on one occasion, because the FCC is registered in the U.S. So they're knowingly letting this crap out. The other problem is, if we go to the meter manufacturer, there's a meter manufacturer letter, it goes specifically, and they're building a product which doesn't conform to C95.1 which is one of the IEEE standards. It doesn't conform with the 519. In fact, it contributes to dirty electricity, so it should be fixed by way of a filter, and they can put a filter inside the meter if they design it properly. And so there's nothing, I hate to say it, but there's nothing to explain that hasn't been explained. All those exhibits are not my opinion. Okay, that's the beautiful thing of it. Those exhibits aren't my opinion, they're actually law. So if you don't understand the law, then I'm sorry, but you probably can't represent the case.
Yes,
The hope
absolutely.
is that they'll take the file and they'll read this, and whoever gets a hold of it, the government official or meter person or your employer or school board, whatever, will read this and go, I had no idea. The hope is they'll go, I had no idea this was causing me harm. Holy crap, and it's harming these people. Because most people are ignorant of the fact. They assume that just because a lawyer stamped it or the government has stamped it, that it's legal. Well, I hate to tell you, I've been working in law for 30 years. I see a lot of things stamped by lawyers, by courts, and a lot of things approved by the government, and the government doesn't do any background checks. I mean, we can prove that. I mean, we had lead paint, we had asbestos, we had DDT, Agent Orange, we had mercury switches, we had mercury in fillings, for crying out loud. So the government is ignorant because half the time they get somebody in there that's not qualified in a technical way to be able to manage the portfolio that they're doing. So I don't care. See, I'm giving them an option. I'm saying, you may not have known. And I'm okay with that. You didn't know. But here's the document that says you do know. And now because you do know, you have a moral and legal obligation to fix it. Now, if it doesn't work out and they say, oh, screw it, I'm just going to ignore it, now they're in legal hot water. Because you, as a lawyer, or not you specifically, but a lawyer is really a very poor representative for the law if he brings something into court without first trying to mediate. And if you know anything about law, well, the courts will tell you if you don't know, law school should have told you, you try and mediate your differences before you go into court. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying, here's the problem, here's the solution, get rid of the stupid meter or tower or whatever it may be, because here's what it's causing. And if they're derelict in their duty, or they just want to just say, the heck with it, then we have the grounds to bring them into court. Those documents that are there are pretty closely written so that they can be used in court. Because when you have an exhibit, if you pull an exhibit of, let's say, the electrical code 519, just hypothetically, you can't change the contents of that document. If you did, you altered evidence, and it's not a true copy of whatever the law is you're trying to quote, so you have nothing to interpret. You just have to understand the letter and understand what each one of those exhibits presents. And in order to do that, you've only got to review at maximum a 19-page letter. If you don't comprehend the 19-page letter, then unfortunately, I hate to say it, you're probably not qualified to argue the case. When you argue a case, you should be able to explain it backwards, forwards, and upside down, so that if you get asked some kind of a question, you're not sitting there going, I don't know, I'd have to call somebody that's in, I don't know, Canada to find out.
Absolutely.
It
there's in fact an old adage about lawyers, and that is no lawyer should ask a question that they don't already know the answer to.
Exactly.
And
when you
ask
a question, get them to try entrap themselves if you can.
Exactly. I have to commend your enthusiasm and your spirit, Stan. I love the fact that you've been working on this for such a long time, and that you've compiled an impressive dossier of laws and principles, guidelines, and other documents that may be used as for submission as exhibits in a court case. I'm also particularly impressed with the 16-page letter, which I received a zip file with 5 different potential targets for these letters and the accompanying documents. They are essentially, the main body is the same in all of them, but you're changing who it's being directed to and customizing it for their purposes, whether it's an employer or a school or educational institution, etc. So with that commendation, I have to say that the devil is always in the detail, particularly if it were, as it were, in how we could use something like that in Australia. Not that one doesn't understand the underlying principles, because there's a great deal of common sense in that lead document, and it will impress the crap out of everybody from someone who is completely unfamiliar with the fact that 5G, electromagnetic frequencies and 5G can be dangerous to humans and to the environment. And it will impress people at the medium to corporate level. It'll impress employers. But when it comes down to the technical detail, when the lawyers get involved, and I am, as a solicitor, I am a lawyer, but I am a general practitioner. I have a skill up to a certain point, which can be applied, but I am like you, I'm a huge advocate of what we call here, what you call mediation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an advocate of ADR, or alternative dispute resolution, and that is, hey, look, this is what we could do. Here's a big truckload of information for you. We could sue you on 100 different points just in these documents. You need to know that this is that you are on the chopping block if you don't comply with this. As an employer, I'd rather not sue you, so let's mediate. Let's resolve this dispute. Withdraw this, and I'll come back to work. Withdraw this, and I won't sue you. Now, it'll impress everybody right up to the point where, you know, the people in my profession will say, well, I've got an equally skilled legal person on the other side, and if they're working for a telco, they've got $300,000 or $1 million to play with, and on this side, I'm either challenging or making the claim on the basis that I'm doing it all pro bono. I'm busy. I'm working my fingers to the bone in a number of different other matters. I have one frightened potential litigant, and they don't have a lot of funding, and they don't have a lot of support. They don't have a lot of knowledge. They don't have a lot of patience. They may well be dying because of their own medical and other concerns or injuries. So it becomes quite difficult to launch such a case. If I may say, I see a great deal of value in ensuring that your documents, and particularly your front cover letter, is dispatched to as many people as possible. And anybody who uses this cover letter needs to be able to know it inside out. I read it and read it reasonably well, and am familiar with virtually every submission that you made in there under every subheading. There's very little in that that surprised me or was new to my own research.
Right.
I certainly absolutely advocate that be brought forward, and that people sit down one-on-one with their employers. If they understand what's in that cover letter, that may be enough to persuade to resolve the dispute before a lawsuit comes in. You really do not want lawyers involved. Lawyers are look, I'm part of the profession, but I don't want to misspeak. I don't want to slander anybody, but I hate the law. I think the law is an absolute ass. I do my best in there, but I know that we're dealing with human beings. We are dealing with folks who have emotions, folks who are not sociopathic, folks who have genuine grievances that need to be addressed. So if we can use this letter, and you can save a lot of printing costs by just sending the 16-page letter, and then make reference to the 480 or 960-page exhibit evidence as a PDF, and say, I need you to understand the contents of this cover letter. If you are willing to go forward, then here is the exhibit evidence that could be used if we were in a Canadian or a US jurisdiction, and we will be applying, we can be applying international laws, international guidelines, and we will do our research for this particular province or this particular state of South Australia, or territory in Australia,
Right.
which is not a small thing. So understand, as the person submitting this, understand your 16-page letter back to front, and say that I have all of this other stuff in reserve. Here's the PDF. I'll print it out for you if you don't read it, or and then ask for a sit-down meeting with either by yourself with the employer or by yourself with the education institution, the school principal or the school board. More ideally, get a couple of your co-workers who also understand. Get a couple of other parents and teachers who are also on board, and then you can submit in unison the contents of the cover letter. And then once you have the sit down, you may want to bring one printed copy in there with you, just to be able to refer to it.
Right.
That will save you a lot of printing costs. Now, if you cannot resolve, or if you get the Australian turn of phrase is, if you get their back up, if you get them to, like a cat, they start hissing and spitting, and they cannot, they're not happy with what you're doing because it sounds like a threat, then they'll put their lawyers onto it, and you won't hear from them. You can lodge any requests that you like, and they'll just ignore you, right up to the point that you actually lodge something in court. By that time, you better have, if you're going to bring lawyers into the matter, you better have anything from $10,000 through to $1 million to back you up, because you don't know how ready they are going to be to fight you on every technical detail. Now, I am in what I call the lawyer's dilemma. I genuinely, deeply want this movement and the awareness of it to be brought to everybody's attention. I think that the ultimate goal here is to educate the public to the point where they are all at a revolutionary tipping point. They all want the hell. They're basically going down there demanding, and there's nobody who can claim ignorance that electromagnetic frequency doesn't cause harm, and B, that the law is genuinely on their side, and C, a little bit distant further down the track in order to maintain the old street cred, C, that there is very likely to be a campaign of secrecy and intentional obstruction by institutions and corporations and governments in order to hide the fact that what they're doing is illegal and unhumanitarian. So here is the lawyer's dilemma. I do not want to take the wind out of anybody's sails. I want every person on the planet to read your cover letter, and I want them to be able to go person to person while things are still friendly to their school board, to their employer, and to their Minister of Parliament, to their counsellor, to their lawyer, to their doctor. Explain these are their concerns. Hope to get the individuals on side. Say, present the exhibit evidence as not testimony that would be used in court necessarily, but as proof of concept.
Yep.
Because and then I've had employees come to me in the past where, oh look, I'm not really happy with that con. I would like to. I'd prefer not to come to work if you can't do X, Y, Z for us. And I look at that, well, that's pretty reasonable. That's a pretty reasonable request. And are you by yourself, Joe? Is that just your concern? No, actually, Fred and Wilma and Barney also have the same concerns. They didn't have the courage to speak up, but I know that they are on side as well. Well, I'll do something about that because I want to make sure that everybody's happy in my workplace. And then you may get the job done, little by little. But as for attacking at the law level. We need energized spirits like yourself, Stan. We need people with experience who have already done the paperwork and dealt with the law as they have. But be prepared for a significant stoush when it comes to getting a document in court. I'll give you one example only. There is a lawyer here in Australia by the name of Ray Broomhall. He's the man who devised the so-called criminal assault strategy, which is based on 22 steps. The 22 steps involve collecting very basic information about who you're going to sue. Excuse me. Who are you going to prosecute? Is it just the person who the telco, or is it the person who built the tower? Is it the person whose land the tower sits upon? Is it the person who installed the actual equipment, or the device manufacturer who put the equipment on the towers? Is it the council who permitted the switching on of this particular tower in their area, or who approved its construction? The answer is all of those people can be co-defendants in a claim.
That's right. That's why there's all those documents in different versions.
Exactly.
Yep.
So in fact, if you need to sue all of these people, there's some foundational information that needs to be gathered. What is the Australian business number of the corporation, of the council? What is the name of the CEO? What was the date that your notice was sent to them? When it was received by them, was it received by registered post, so you can prove that they actually received that notice in court as a service document? Are you making a claim in criminal assault? Because in law, the application of force, unconsensual force applied to another person, and this should be across the board in most criminal jurisdictions in the Western Hemisphere. If you want to sue somebody, prosecute somebody for a criminal assault, you have to show that they applied force to you that was non-consensual. So I can be walking down the street and a guy comes up to me and for whatever reason he doesn't like my looks, and he then starts jabbing his finger in my face and threatening me and bowing up and making all kinds of threatening, menacing actions against me. The moment he touches me on the shoulder, even if he hasn't actually struck me, I can say that is an application of force that was non-consensual. All right? That's right. And in that case, he could be prosecuted in court, and he can go to jail for a criminal assault. Now, the question is electromagnetic radiation a force? I would say yes, but in fact, in Australian courts, that's still up in the air. Is electromagnetic? Well, is it well? You could say it's a vibration. It's a nuisance in property law, in tort law, and in civil law. If someone makes a lot of noise and vibration next door, you can sue them in tort and say that that's a nuisance and a trespass upon an encroachment upon my land. But it doesn't necessarily apply in the criminal law. And so all of these technicalities would be argued, all of these so-called loopholes could be argued by the other side. And here's that example I was going to give you. Ray Broomhall, who devised the 22-step strategy, said, provide me with all this detail and I will go to court for you. I'll only charge you about $5,000. It's not going to pay me all my costs, but I can try and do this for you and keep it in the simple magistrates court, which is the lowest level courts here in Australia. And hopefully, if we can get it thrown out of court at that level, which is nice and cheap for everybody, then it won't go any further, and the telcos will be inspired to not proceed with their deployment. Well, guess what? He he had a client. They went to the magistrate's court, and there to greet them was $300,000 worth of expert evidence, opinion experts who were presented. They had, I won't say, there was a change of the judge at the last minute. Okay, I can't make spurious assertions that the judge was not doing their job properly, but it looks and smells. You know, if it looks like a duck and smells like a duck, this magistrate in a very small claims jurisdiction, which should be under what, $10,000, ended up, because the telco had come so prepared, he ended up eviscerating Ray Broomhall in the court by saying that this was an incompetent cause of action, that it was a ridiculous waste of everybody's time. And then he proceeded to give $150,000 in solicitor's costs awarded to the telco against Broomhall's client. Now, if you think that the telcos are not prepared for this, I absolutely can tell you that they are. They are very wary of it, and they are playing a very careful chess game with you. So this is why it's my assertion. It's my assertion that I don't want to take the wind out of everybody's sails. I know that we need to try and convince as many of the lay public and the medium-informed public and the well-informed public, so that we can get to a tipping point that other action can be taken in the court of the people, in the court of public opinion, so that there's nowhere else to turn. But they do seem to have us pretty well stitched up when I look at these legal things on a day-to-day basis. So I really apologize for my lengthy my lengthy rejoinder to you there, but that's the way that I see things at this time. And that's why I asked you the question at the outset: what is specifically your cause of action? Is it in trespass? Because that's property law. Is it in nuisance or negligence? Because that's civil law. Is it in assault? Because that's criminal law. Each of those are 3 different courts.
Right.
Is it a legislative application in Australia's federal court, or is it something that needs to go through the state court system from small claims, local courts, magistrates court, through to district court, and then through to the Supreme Court, which is only state level here, and then should we take it to the High Court in Australia? So the devil is most certainly in the detail. I hope I haven't spoken too quickly, and I apologize for taking so much time in this rejoinder.
No problem. In fact, one of the things on a previous call, I don't think you were on it, is I gave them a basic generic letter which was simplified. In essence, it was the same as the letter that you have with 16 pages, but instead of saying refer to exhibit, 1, 2, 3, 4, exhibits or backup, supporting documents can be provided. And in that case, they could just send out the 16 pages. But the thing is, like in our case, we want to send this thing, for example, to the federal government. Well, chances of you getting a meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada or Donald Trump or whoever's representing representing Australia is probably not going to happen. So at the lower level with the school board and the principals and your employer, obviously that shouldn't be too hard to do. But the higher levels, and what we did in that document, because you said you read it, is we showed them where they're violating certain levels of the law. And so if a court permits an attorney, or the court itself does it, where they actually disregard the law, there's a doctrine called judges' immunity is not absolute. But also there's a second doctrine where they lose subject matter jurisdiction. If they don't follow the law the way it is, they're no longer protected. You can then go after the court if you want to be bothered. So the hope was that we would get these people on site and they go, well, we had no idea. And then if they don't, basically heed the warning, then each territory, if we call it that, is going to have to analyze it and say, well, where does this best fit, right? Like in our case, you know, we can't in Ontario, or at least in Canada, I can't go to a court and say I want to lay a criminal charge. I want to file a criminal complaint, regardless of the merit. I don't care. If you walk into a court and you say I want to lay a criminal complaint, you can't do it. The only people that can do it is the RCMP or the local cops, which to me is kind of stupid, but that's the way it goes. We have statutory court, and technically, unless you go to small claims court or traffic court, you're going to go basically into a general court or the Court of Queen's Bench, but it's still a general court. So I can't lay a criminal charge. So I can infer it based on the law, and they will accept it. In Australia, your rules will be slightly different, right? Which you, as you already said.
That's
And
right. In fact, yeah,
yeah.
you can have,
Now,
here in Australia, you have the police will do a prosecution for you. Prosecution meaning a criminal action,
right.
cause of action. However, there also are some obscure possibilities for bringing a private prosecution. Although when I made my own telephone call to the local courts about that, they were no use at all. They weren't able to point me to the specific areas in the court rules where I could apply that. So, you know, you have to go and pay a lawyer, proper lawyer, to go and do this for you. Pardon
well,
me,
as a
sorry,
lawyer, you should be able to dig those laws up yourself. I mean, you have access to law books, and like for example, we got access to a thing called Law Pro, so we can look up precedent cases and things like that.
Absolutely. There is, in my specific case, as I mentioned, I'm a general practitioner. I've been practicing law now for about 28, 29 years. The thing is that I don't like the law. And as such, I have my law degree and my practicing certificate, but I don't take on clients. I am doing everything I'm doing in relation to the EMF campaign and the 5G campaign off my own bat, pro bono. It's free. I have my own tower up the road here, which they switched on just over a year ago now, and I'm being irradiated. But yes, I have the capability of doing specific legal research. I'm not as good as a barrister would be, for example, and this is why as you go into higher and higher areas of specialty, you need to be able to pay those advocates who will act on your behalf to drill down on this specific detail. And you've got to cover all of the bases before going to court. As I said, a lawyer does not ask a question or make any submission that they don't already know the answer to. And all of that preparation, not the 1/10, not the 9/10 of the iceberg, the 99 100ths of the work that never gets seen and never gets submitted in court, because it's a win if they don't see it. That all of that is what needs to be done and paid for by lawyers when you actually get into the actual court system, or into the when you're ready for a litigation.
Right. Yep. Now, like I said, we made a basic generic letter for your employer, your teacher, your principal, the school board.
Yeah.
You know, but on the higher level, like when it's a government violation and they're letting this crap go through, you're not going to, chances are, get a meeting with the President of the United States, right? Even if you call there, chances are you can't talk to them. I've called government officials, and you can't get in through there either. So the only choice I have is to mail them a package and say, here. Like, I don't care if he reads it or his secretary reads it. Point is, it was addressed to him. If he gets his kids to read it, he's still the one liable, because he's supposed to be in charge of it, right?
That's right.
Like for us in Canada, each minister is in charge of a certain thing. There's 300 and some seats in the House of Commons. Most of them, I believe, are wasting time. But if you find the one that's in charge of this specific area, you can send it to them and say, here, this is the problem. You don't know it. That's fine. Here it is. Kindly fix it. The hope is that they'll actually do what we tell them. And the hope behind this whole Facebook group, this is not the only Facebook group that deals with 5G.
No,
I went to every one of them and said, everybody's talking about it. Well, here's some legal documents to help you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we get like 4 or 5 people on a call.
For that reason, for that reason, I cannot but commend you. I think bringing some form of action to the notice, to the public attention, is a huge and heroic task, and that's what you're doing. Keep presenting that into the groups. Some hopefully people can organize themselves into various structures, hierarchical or otherwise, so that they can get people who are legal eagles, as I call them, some who can read the documents and understand them, some who some other people in the group might be more financially able to support but can't really support with their time. Other people could be doing leaflet drops. Other people can bring in their social network and spread the word. Others who might feel energized enough will read it well enough and be prepared to be the advocate and sit down with their employer, or sit down with their union, or sit down with their local member of parliament or Congress, and read the submissions. I mean, I've but we're doing this all the way up to, from lower to middle to upper middle level management. And when you are ready to, and it's important to serve these documents, serve these letters of notice to your parliamentarians at the highest level. But a prosecution of a Minister of Parliament at the state or at the federal level requires a very well-financed, organized campaign of legal eagles, lawyers, and potential litigants who can support that by way of a class action. So,
Yep.
Absolutely, keep spreading that word and that information, and and just like when you go to your doctor and you say, "Hey, doctor, I've got this ringing in my ears. You know, I have a titanium plate in my hand. Every time I use the mouse, I feel like my hand gets cooked because it's a little microwave mouse, little Bluetooth thing, which is microwave radiation. I have, you know, I have fogginess of the brain. I know I have immunosuppression. I have all of these concerns." And the doctor says, "Well, what do you think is causing that?" "Well, I think it's the 5G tower down by my house. I think it's the Wi-Fi from the person next door who won't switch it off at night." Well, the doctor says, "Oh, I never even heard of that. I never even realized it was an issue," because they're not taught these things in school. They're not taught them as part of their curriculum, nor post their in continuing professional development training after they leave school. So they don't know anything about it. It's your job to inform them about that, to bring it first to their attention. If they are willing to listen, then you put other evidences in their hand, like dissertation abstracts. You give them peer-reviewed research studies showing them the adverse health effects. You do the same with your lawyers. You've got to convince your lower and middle level people. Then you begin to change the minds of the professionals, because those buggers, it will take them a long time to move out of their comfort zone. And you just have to have enough people complaining about it until they're forced to research these things. And this is why you need different kinds of documents: letters of introduction to your doctor, letters of you know, little checklists of ready research papers that you've used in the past, and which has convinced maybe your employer but cannot convince your doctor, or hasn't been able to convince your doctor. So little checklists that of anything from a YouTube video through to a news article, through to a court document, through to information about court cases that have been issued in other countries, through to letters of rejection of ICNIRP and World Health Organization standards for radiation radiation absorption. Um, you have all of your own separate template documents ready and available, and you disseminate those in amongst your groups and organize your groups until they can become effective platoons of people who can go out and as a unit achieve a particular goal, whether it's a litigation or whether it's a council submission to negate the installation of a tower. And I would love to draw your attention to our own website. Our own organization is Safe EMF Education Network, SEEN. Look it up, please. We just lodged, we just issued our own website, which was launched 4 days ago. It's called SEEN.org.au. We are not for profit. We are looking to educate the public, and we have a fantastic but small group of people here in South Australia on our committee, and we are with you. I support you, and I'll bring this all to the attention of my committee as well.
I have other documents. If you don't mind, in the chat window, type that web address, and then we can copy it out. Because I have other documents. If you guys want them, I mean, you're welcome to it. There's all kinds of stuff. I'll weed through what isn't related to this and make sure you only get the stuff that is. But
yeah,
I have over 1,000 documents to prove our claim.
That would be fantastic, because I'm actually in the process of compiling a database of different documents that may be submitted, and hopefully have, you can go into a filter search and type in adverse health effects, pregnant, lymphocyte, foggy brain, and then it'll bring out all of the medical and scientific research papers or court cases that deal with those specific details. We have a super secure cloud environment like Google Docs and Google Drive.
Yep.
But it's on our own private servers, so that we can hope to use, so we can hope that people can trust that, so that they can put their documents on there and then collaborate in their own little neighborhood groups. So I have our Nextcloud, we have which is the portal. Excuse me, we have our SEEN, SEEN.org.au website. Please check it out. Then we have our Nextcloud portal. We're looking for memberships. As I said, we've only just started to mobilize after many months. We have our constitution in place, and you can look at our objects and purposes. And on our portal, we'll hope to have a repository of all of these documents, even from yourself and from others, which can be with a public link, can be downloaded by anybody, and in private, secure group permission levels. We can offer everything from, we hope to offer everything from litigation, documents that are subject of litigation and therefore should only be viewed by certain groups or individuals who are in the court case, and other, and people can participate in everything from private video chats through to voice chats and audio talks, away from something like Zoom, which we know to be very problematic in terms of its security. But you can look up, I will give my details to Gina, who hopefully might give them to Helen. And I can't seem to be able to type it into this Zoom thing.
You can also send it to manyhandsunified@gmail.com. That's
Great,
directly
great,
to
I'll
us
do
and
that.
bypasses
Absolutely.
all that extra people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you again for your patience and time.
No problem.
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? don't see any activity, so.
Hmm. I'll probably put everybody to sleep.
Well, I'm not sleeping. I got to pay attention to what's going on. Oh, Vince has got a question. Okay, hang on a sec. Hello, Vince.
I was just saying hello.
Oh, okay. Any questions for
Vince.
tonight's call, or are you good?
No, I'm just love what is being said. You know, the information is great.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I bothered you to test it out to make sure it was downloadable. Remember that?
Yeah. Yes. I kind of figured out something. I've been in the house quite some time now, and
Right.
I can just tell something's going on because my moods are changing. And of course, my ears are ringing. And I left the house for a couple hours, and I started feeling a lot better.
Yep.
So I don't know what's going on exactly, but whatever they're doing, it's putting people in a depression. And I know there's a lot going on in the world, but once I left for a couple hours, I started feeling better and came to my senses on, my emotions and the way I feel. So there's something going on, and we need to get to the bottom of it. That's all
Well,
I
I
wanted
don't
to
know
say.
how familiar you are with it, but there's stuff called sound therapy. Okay, and sound is really technically a frequency. And so if you can transmit a signal, which will mess with your mind through a tower by either on purpose or by accident, who knows? But if it's transmitting, it will affect your mood potentially, not necessarily, but potentially. So when they have a carrier like I showed you guys before on a spectrum analyzer, you can see the frequency of whatever it is.
Yes.
I don't care what it is, 5.2 gigahertz. Who cares? And then when they transmit something on top of it, it's kind of like I told you before, like the AM radio. You can tune into say 600 AM, and there's nothing there, and then all of a sudden, the station comes back online, and now it's got the audio signal. So who knows what's being transmitted? Like we know that the government has the technology to use, that type of technology. Now, whether they're doing it or not, you'd need a spectrum analyzer and somebody that knew how to run it. And most spectrum analyzers, people aren't going to buy them. And if they do buy them, they probably don't know how to use them anyway, unless they're, versed in electronics. So then you start getting into that specialty stuff where you have to have somebody that can explain it so that it makes sense to the layman.
Yes.
But yeah, if you had access to, there's a couple of different fluke mix in the oscilloscope that you could have an antenna hooked up to it, or you can use a spectrum analyzer. As I showed you guys in one of the last calls, you can see the signal, and then you can see where they superimpose because they're transmitting something.
Oh yeah. Yes, exactly. I can tell when they turn it off. I can tell when they turn it on, and especially when they turn it up. And I'm getting affected by this.
Right.
Right now, it's not bad. It's very, very low, but at night they start turning it up, and I wish I had that instrument where I can, have it near me and turn it on when I feel it going through my body, my ears ringing. I get the humming noise, and it starts to get you a little crazy. And then, you got to turn, some music on or something to drown it out. But it's still there. But I wish I had that handheld where I can justify what is happening to me.
It's entirely possible to go to eBay and buy yourself a $12 EMF meter, which registers. You have one of those?
Yeah, I have a tri-field meter. This
Good.
signal is not being picked up by the tri-field meter, okay?
Okay.
What my tri-field meter does pick up, when I put it on RF, I go around my house, in one particular spot in my house, a light switch, I have a radio frequency right at the light switch.
Yeah.
I Now, what I'm presuming is this 5G, as me and Stan and others been talking about, that it's hitting the power lines and traveling into your house wiring.
Yes, in fact, what happens is different lengths of cable, different lengths of copper wire can act as antennas for different radio frequencies, and then they are retransmitted out
Okay.
as like a mirror in some ways.
Yes.
If the length of the cable or the length of the wire is correct, then that retransmission is one way to identify what we call dirty electricity, because it comes out again. And but you can find that many of the cheaper versions of tri-field and EMF meters do not register all the entire range of frequencies. You may have to go up to $120, $150 or for a more powerful device, and
Yeah.
then you
Yes,
can,
that's what I did. I did
yeah,
buy
and go out to your neighbors and whatnot, and hire it out to them, or use it to demonstrate, or take videos of the readings that you're taking, and post them on YouTube.
Oh. Well, yeah, it's not 5G because that I'm reading it. It's some type of other radio frequency coming through because the tri-field meter will not read 5G.
Yeah, so the frequency, the submillimeter waves, millimeter and
Yes.
submillimeter waves are not quite registered by that. The other thing is that it's not necessarily the radio wave itself, because it's not a constant, like a hose being turned on and off. Sorry, like a hose being turned on. There's your electromagnetic radiation being emitted. That may be, the way that I understand it is that it's like the hose being switched on and off, and little spurts of the emission are the signal itself. So, for example, just like a Morse code, you go dut, 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 switching on and off. That is actually the information being carried. It's not the water being ejected, nor is it the electromagnetic radiation being ejected. The data and information is on the number of times it's switched on and off, and that's what they refer to as pulsed
Yes.
pulsed signal. So the signal doesn't have to be too strong, but switching it on and off so many 100 million times a second is what causes havoc with your internal, everything from your internal gut flora through to your limbic system, your nervous system, because they are all there's blood in your veins, and there's iron in your blood, and the iron becomes a conductor, and you're being electrocuted at the cellular and molecular level hundreds and millions of times a second.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's where the adverse effects occur over time on a cumulative basis. It's not, being subjected to one blast of radiation here or there that's the problem. It's the cumulative effect of it over time, and how that interferes with the endocrine system, the hormone response, with the nervous system, and with your ability to respond and heal as quickly as you need to. It's a general wearing down. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that info.
Vince, if you want to detect that type of radio transmission as he's talking about, I told you guys last time there was a radio transmission where a person was getting so bombarded with it that they actually had a huge problem, and his wife lost her teeth. They were bolted into her mouth through, medical, and they turned around and said, okay, well, this is whatever, and they didn't do anything about it. and now they've admitted that this is a problem, right? So they went and tore down the tower. So for those that think this doesn't have an effect, believe me, it has an effect. But I showed you guys last week, you know, where you can see the signal where there's hardly anything, and then you can see where it boosts it way up.
Yes.
And there's a Dr. Sam Milham that's actually written a report, and I showed you guys the frequencies from an HF59D. Very important to use the D because it goes to a higher frequency. If you need to go beyond basically 6 gigahertz, which is where 5G starts, then you're going to have to go to a spectrum analyzer, and you're looking at a several $1,000 piece of equipment. The HF59D is expensive enough.
Wow.
But so once you start, that's what I was telling you guys earlier. When you start getting into being able to prove this stuff, and I actually offered to go to people's houses to prove it, you know, people took offense to that, and I said, well, okay, do it yourself. But as you know, the gentleman pointed out, you don't know what's going on, and unless you buy this equipment, which is kind of crazy to do for a one-time application, you're basically screwed, right?
Well, yeah, I wonder if a year or so ago, I can't remember the place, but they do rent instruments like you described.
Yep.
And I've been trying to find a place because
I'll find it for you. I'll find it for you and give it to you.
You know, because I tell you what, if I had that for a week or so or whatever the time limit is, I would really make things, you know, available for neighbors and, you know, and just let them know, you know, this is what's going on. This is why you're feeling dragged out. This is why you're feeling tired.
Right.
Your anxiety's high. Things like that. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna let everybody listen to this. I don't remember if I got the right recording because this has been a few months since I've had this. So listen to this for a second, okay? Everybody, just listen.
Now when it stops bouncing, there's no noise, there's no nothing. You feel a whole lot. It starts up again.
See how it was quiet and then it started up? That's the data that we're talking about. That's not the best video I have. Or audio. I have another one, which is even worse. Now that audio was picked up by a device called an acoustometer. Okay, and what you can do is you can actually take that acoustometer. There's an audio out file, and you can record that. So that could be used as evidence in court. An acoustometer, we went through an acoustometer before, but if you take that acoustometer and you use the HF59D, you can use the HF59A, HF59B, HF59C, HF59D. And what they will do is they record on an some driver's SIM card or whatever the heck it uses, and you can run that software, and it will allow you to look at the output, and the output can then be analyzed to say, okay, well, what is this? And then you can see where when you'll see it pulse, and when it pulses, you'll be able to see the output on the HF59D software show you specifically, you know, when it happens and all the rest of it. Okay. Now I'm going to give you another thing to listen to. Hopefully I got the right audio this time.
Hi, this message is for Ken Mack. My name is Carl Kent. I'm CFO at Three-Way Technologies. I'm returning your calls. Ken, we take care of all these things very seriously, so we're looking into what you articulated in your cover letter and voicemails, and we'll get back to you, but we do need some time to do so in order to do a thoughtful process. So I just want to let you know I did receive your messages, and we will be back in touch with you.
So that was, it's kind of squirrely, but that's an audio recording what we have with a company that actually knows that their meters are producing harmful effects. Okay, so they're acknowledging we have all this information, all this evidence, right? So we can prove it if we have to. The point is we actually have to do the legwork to prove it. so that they can't deny it in court, because it's pretty hard to deny an audio recording with a spectrum analyzer, and most people are going to go, we don't know what that is, so they're not going to be able to dispute it, which is fine. We don't care. But, right, here's another one.
Recording was done with Michael Schwabe upstairs in our house, and approximately every minute this pulse came in, and
There's 3 pulses in 29 seconds. So that's the pulsing he's talking about. Okay? You can hear there's noise in the background, and then you hear the thump, 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 thump. That's the data he's talking about. Okay? I have all this data, so we can use it if we need it. But if we checked it on an individual basis, there's no way they can deny it. And when that pulsing comes through the wiring, as the gentleman said, remember when I talked specifically about quarter wave, half wave, full wave antennas? If the wiring is exactly the right length, it could be any one of them. Quarter wave, half wave, eighth wave, who cares? The point is it's radiating. One way you might be able to solve the problem, as I suggested before, is to replace the switch, just in case it's defective. The other way you could fix the problem is whatever the wiring is to that specific circuit, change the length of the wire. Have the wire an extra couple lengths, loop it a few times in the wall and run it to the switch, and then do the same thing from the switch up to the light. And you may cause enough resistance, if you will, that's what it technically is, to that signal, and you may be able to alleviate your problem. I had a similar problem. I rewired my entire house, but my entire house was all messed up, and I've gone over that before. You guys already know that. So that's what he's specifically talking about, that last audio I gave you, which is the one I was looking for. Is there any other questions from anybody on the group? Whitney, I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you talking. Oh, hang on a sec.
She must have been muted.
Well, she wasn't initially, but apparently she is. There we go.
Yep.
Whitney, are you there? Okay, we can't hear her. She's somehow been kicked off for some reason. She's not muted, but anyway, whatever. I'll phone her back later. I know her phone number. That's no problem. But if we have any issues, have anybody else got questions, that's the exact proof that we kind of need, the stuff I just showed you. Okay, and we have it. That's the good news. We have it.
Again, I would commend you all to continue your pursuits in all our pursuits in with the same vigor that you have demonstrated here today. Keep spreading the word, folks, and keep speaking to. Try not to stay in the echo chamber where you're only talking to people who are already converted, but speak also to your your higher ups, whether that be your parents or your employers or folks who you normally would not have the courage to bring this to the attention of. And don't worry about looking like a fool. I've been talking about this stuff now for over a decade to the people in my circles, and it's only now that we're all experiencing the COVID thing, that COVID-19, that you have strange experiences of people calling you up and saying, yeah, Con, that was, when you told us about that or the other, can you tell me more about that now? I want to know how and why and where. you'll get them come back to you when they're ready, when they're evolved to the point where they are ready to research and or protest at their level. But that's the process that we're going through. Please continue your good work, guys.
Thank you. Any last minute questions?
Let me see if it'll work now. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back to us.
Oh, awesome. What I was going to say is on your scene.org site, if you choose to make links to the document packages, let us know so that we can share those links out, because we don't have a place other than on Facebook where these things are hosted right now. I mean, the link is through Google, but yeah, so if you can are starting a documents archive list, let us know that, and I will definitely share that around.
Absolutely. I have, I'm just sending you, I'm sending one person who I have the email of, the scene.org.au and our Nextcloud site. Understand that in due course, the use of technologies where we are hosting our own private clouds and our own document repositories should become the norm. It took me quite a number of months to set up, because I'm technical, but I'm not that super fast. It took me 11 months to set up my Nextcloud server on an old laptop here, and then I called some guy through Fiverr, Fiverr, who for $15 set up the whole damn thing in 3 days. I mean,
Yep.
so in due course, we can all host our own documents. You just need an old laptop or a PC. And I hope to deploy this this Nextcloud feature off to other activist groups so that they can use that for themselves and they can join their own clouds together. So, for example, if they try to do a distributed denial of service attack against my particular IP address, all of the documents will be copied to my neighbor down the road and to my other friend across the country on a federated cloud. And this is called Nextcloud. Nextcloud, one word. Look it up and you can see, and you can all serve your own documents as well. Decentralization.
Well, thank you.
Yes, please send me the links.
We were looking into how to host those files because we're going to be putting up a manyhandsunified.net site.
Yep.
And so thank you for shooting us in the right direction on that. And I might be in contact with you through the website about that as well.
Yeah. Get your local geek to look up Nextcloud, and it can be downloaded onto a virtual machine, onto an old PC. You have to get yourself a domain name. That's the only little trick that will really need a technician to sort it out for you. But then you can host your own documents. But for the time being, we have to use what's available. And ultimately, my view has been, if I'm being listened to by some nefarious person in the NSA or whatnot, I hope that they do bloody well listen, and that perhaps they even be persuaded by what I have to say. They're not just recording me. So that's how I view it at the moment.
Right.
Well, there's some very good advice. What I see going forward is kind of creating a template for people to take up as far as kind of like a workshop for their own area. So, and it's very true. We need small groups that have all the different expertise in each area.
Yeah, and if you can begin compiling a database of the people around you, of course, make all the appropriate assurances so people don't feel insecure about providing that information. But you need to understand that unless if you've got, let's say, a Facebook group and 100 people have joined, some of them will be technicians, some will be professionals, some will be researchers. each of those persons needs to let you know, oh, I have 1 free hour per week. Another one might have 30 free hours per week. And then you can begin allocating and assigning tasks to each of them. And, oh, did you know that since we have 1,000 people in our Facebook group, that you, Joe, have 3 people in your local neighborhood who you can meet up with, who you didn't know about. You need to get a meeting together and organize to contest that tower up the road, or do a leaflet drop in your neighborhood, and just organize, allow people to provide with a little questionnaire, you know, what their available resources are and how they would like to assist. And then it's a matter of logistics. Organize, 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 get yourself into hierarchies, and begin making your submissions to the keystone people in your communities.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Not a worry.
Mhm.
I may need to be going shortly because I had another appointment to go to, but it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Please continue, but I might need to go.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, guys.
If you could just send an email to my top email address there, smcdonal@kos.net, then we can keep in contact, and I can also send you those other documents that are relative to what we're talking about today. Posting
you.
stuff on Facebook's kind of a pain. It has a 25 meg limit, and you know, it's a whole host of problems.
Yeah, it's BTN. It's better than nothing, but it's not
Yep.
ideal. One more time, Stan. M for Mike.
Yeah,
C?
SMC.
Yeah.
DONAL, and then at KOS.net. KarenOscarSam.net.
KOS.net. Thank you so much for that. I'll send that to you directly.
Alrighty.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Helen, do you have any questions for us, or? Oh, there we go. It finally let me unmute you.
Yeah, because I think I was doing it for you. I was trying to unmute myself as well. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm a little bit fried in the brain, but
drink coffee. It helps.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've gone off coffee. I'm on my licorice tea, actually. But
okay.
Yeah, I'll just yeah. I think what Con said too is just getting it all. I'm busy printing up flyers, and I delivered a whole pack this morning to a lady at Redland Bay and one at Cleveland, and made some little posters to go in cars for this other lady. So I dropped all those off this morning. But yeah, I believe too, you know, it's just getting the information out there. And bringing awareness to people as well. We've got 300 odd people in our group, and we have got little bits of help, but it's just very overwhelming. And I'm not an academic, it's very overwhelming. So yeah, doing what I can, you know. But yeah.
Are you still under this COVID lockdown or no?
I'm going to have to unmute because I've got a call to work. This is a home-based business too. Sorry, I'm just going to have to mute for a minute.
Vince, you got any questions?
No, I'm just listening. No, I'm good. I'm good. I want to thank you all.
Well, I showed you that audio thing, so that helped. That you know, shows you what he was talking about is legitimate, because you could hear that tap 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 in the background.
Oh yeah.
That may be what you're getting. I don't know. So what you know, you'll have to check into it. But in order to do this, you need some pretty sophisticated equipment. If you're just trying to detect RF, you know, it's okay. There's a source I'll move my bed to the other side of the room. You don't want to be spending, $1,700 on a piece of test equipment. And for
Right.
the spectrum analyzer, you could be looking at $7,000 or $8,000. You could buy one used.
Yeah.
I mean,
And you,
potentially, but then does it work, and does it have a set of instructions with it? I don't know.
well, for me, that tri-field meter, it kind of
Woke you up,
dialed
so to
me.
speak?
Yeah, it dialed me in, what was happening, not just in my house, but everybody's house I checked. And yes, I had to move my bed or turn off the breakers. There was a point I was sleeping in a spare bedroom and I had the breakers off. But
Yep.
you got to understand, you got some wiring under the joists and things like that too. But yeah, man, everything I've been throwing at it, it's still affecting me. Just crazy. I mean, this is, I think this process was to be against the people, for sure.
It is. In fact, if you look at the Rockefeller Foundation document, which I didn't give you guys, but you can look it up or I'll put it on the next call. I can give you the document. It tells you exactly what the plan is. There's no disputing what the plan is.
Yeah. Well, what about all these satellites they're putting into space? Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's going to be another problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're going to shoot down some waves, and cancer-causing waves.
Okay, so what's done?
Well,
So
any
this
RF
stuff,
could potentially cause cancer if it's, strong enough. As the last caller said, if you're exposed to it once, for 5 minutes or, hopefully less, but it'll cause a problem, yeah, but your body will recover. But it's when you're repeatedly over and over and over and over again.
right.
One of the documents that we talk about that's in that exhibit file there, the big massive 980-page thing, is it has a thing in there. It's a government document that says the exposure from 0 to 300 gigahertz, prolonged exposure. It tells you what the harmful side effects are. And if you look at the World Health Organization, not that I trust those guys, but they turn on and class RF regulation as class 2B carcinogenic, which is the same as lead. And if you look at Safety Code 6, which is obsolete, it was written in the 80s, for crying out loud, they tell you that you're going to be exposed to a certain level of RF radiation, 0.02 microwatts per millimeter squared, which, what the hell's that mean? But you can only be exposed to that for 6 minutes of the day. But yet you're exposed to it 24 hours a day. So obviously we've already got the law on our side. That's the beautiful thing, right? The law is right there, Safety Code 6 for Canada and the States. And then if you look at the IEEE standard, that gives us some more ammo. And then there's also the European regulations. And that's all covered in that basic 16-page letter. I could have put a heck of a lot more in there, but I don't think somebody's going to read beyond 16 pages.
Right.
They'll probably forget what they read because their comprehension will be out the window, probably while they're glued to their cell phone.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, we can give them more, but the idea was that here's the basic overview, and if you don't want to, heed the warning, then we will go after them and say, look, here's federal government documents, here's military documents, here's, European standards, here's this. Like the last guy said, he's not going to turn around, and whoever you're going up against is not going to turn around and just lay down and go, okay, you're right, I'm sorry, we lost, and you win. No way, there's no way in hell they're going to do that. They're going to fight this thing with everything they got, because if we set a precedent to prove that tower is a piece of junk, for lack of a better term, they'd have to tear down every tower. Can you imagine the cost involved in that? But
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when Saskatchewan wanted to put in smart meters, I wrote a letter to the Saskatchewan government and I said, here's your potential problems with your smart meters. It wasn't anywhere near as good as the document I gave you guys. They recalled the smart meters on all homes across, Saskatchewan. Now they're trying to sneak the bastards back in because they're trying to put them in just businesses. So that's how that works. But I mean, we got to keep on top of it, because if we don't, then they're going to eventually put them all back. and I showed our idiot Minister of Health and our local guy that's in charge of Ontario Hydro that these meters were bad news, and they denied it. And what I first did, okay, was I told them this is my concern, and I didn't give them any ammunition, and they denied everything, which was what I wanted them to do, because it's a game. And then I said, okay, well, here's the same letter that I sent them before, and here's all my proof. And they said, well, we can relocate the meter, at your expense. To which I replied, that's like putting lipstick on a pig, because at the end of the day, it's still transmitting dirty electricity, right? Plain and simple.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And the people that put their meters, like I live in a rural area, they think, with them putting their meters at the end of the driveway, it's going to make a significant difference, which it's not.
Of course not. If you have, think of it this way, okay, for all the people that don't get it. Think of two idiots in the neighborhood. I explained this to somebody today. I forget who it was. I said, there's two idiots in the neighborhood. And he's got a 60-watt radio, and you got a 100-watt radio. And you don't like his music, so you crank up your 100-watt radio. And then, and then there's a third party in the system here, and he's got to listen to this crap. Does he care if the thing's 10 feet away? No, the garbage is still in the air. Well, the same thing with this RF. It's still in the air. Right? So we have to get it out of the air, and the only way to get the thing out of the air is to either shut down the tower or knock down the tower.
Yeah. That's what's happening around the world. They're burning
Some
these
places,
towers down.
Yep.
People that are wise, they know what's going on.
Yep. No problem. Any other questions?
Looks like Helen has her hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, I see that.
So this spectrum meter, you said you could get second-hand ones. So what's the full name? Spectrum?
It's called a spectrum analyzer, and what you'll have to do, unless we want it, and I can do this for you if you want, unless you want to get a specific brand, you may want to do that, but you may just want to find a spectrum analyzer. Now, what you have to do, the spectrum analyzer I quoted or told you guys about in the last call actually has an antenna stuck to it. And you can put two different antennas on it based on the frequency. And remember I told you that you had a quarter wave, half wave, full wave antenna?
Yep.
That's why we had to change the antenna. Now, the problem with 5G, if that's what we're going to meter, is it's anywhere from 6 gigahertz to 120 gigahertz, which is a heck of a spectrum. It's a wide range. Now, when we go anything less than 5G, you're only at 2.4 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz in the 4G range, and then everything from 2.4 underneath that is 3G, 2G, 1G, and nobody uses 1G anymore. Now, what we know from this is a rough number, but roughly 1G was 900, and then 2G was double that, so it goes to 16, but they made it 1.8, and then it went to 3.4, and then from 3.4 to basically up to 5 gigahertz. But what you do, if you just have a standard spectrum analyzer, you'll have to have some way to pick up the information. Now, I haven't tried this, but the acoustimeter has an audio output signal. There's a jack on the side of it. So you may be able to take an audio output and just record it, right? Because this thing, you can put it on a tape or something, and then you can try and record it and see if it'll pick it up. But the problem with doing this, because some people have asked me about it, is your tape recorder or audio recorder that you're intending to use may not be designed to register the right frequency. So the best and simplest route is to get a spectrum analyzer which has an antenna which is capable of it. Because every time you record something, you lose a little bit of the signal, right? It's not 100% efficient.
Yeah.
But I can look that up, the spectrum analyzer, because that's what we used before. And that's when I showed you on the last call. It's a 4060, but who the heck makes it? I forgot.
Yeah. I can even have a look online as well.
Yeah, you're going to want something that goes, beyond, you're going to have it starting around 6 gigahertz and go as high as possible, because you have no idea which level they're going to do, and you don't want to buy a spectrum analyzer. And let's say, okay, today it works at 10 gigahertz, and the thing will go to 12. And then if they change their frequency to 20 gigahertz, well, guess what?
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. Yeah.
Okay.
But those spectrum analyzers are $7,000 and up. They're not cheap.
Might win lotto, hey?
You got problems mailing a letter and you want to buy a spectrum analyzer. Okay.
I know. Well, it's not problems. It's just, yeah, it's all
It's
all
expensive
down
to do this.
not, and it's not, and we've got $145, and that was, someone was nice enough to donate $100 of that. And, we've been doing little posters for our cars or houses, and, we've sold $45 of those. So, but
Yep.
it's just hard. It's hard to try and fund it. My partner's he's been very tolerant and put a lot of this through our business. It's been quite a lot. So yeah, money wise, but it's hard when you're the one that's funding it.
I know. I've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah. What are you doing undercover then? You
No, I
doing
do
something
machine
else
shop
we
work.
need to know about?
No, I do machine shop work normally.
Yep. Yeah, well, thank you.
No problem.
I have a question.
Hey, Eddie, it's first time you talk tonight. What's your question?
Well, I just started going through your notice of liability, the long one.
Yep.
And the very first thing is the Sutro Tower.
Yep.
On page 5, it says conclusion. It says, in summary, this review has not found substantial epidemiological evidence to support an association of radiofrequency radiation with cancer. And I just wondered why. I mean, I haven't gone very far into all your papers, but I wondered why you wanted that one first, when it's kind of saying, I mean, if I give this to an official and they go through the very first thing, and it's the first thing conclusion that they come to, it says they have not found a relationship. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it also talks in there about other adverse health effects. So why is it first? It's just because it's the first one I pulled off the shelf or pulled out of the file drawer when I did this. Because the way I ended up having to do this thing to make this whole thing work as a PDF, because my scanner won't scan that many pages, was I actually had to print each document separately, and then I put them in logical order, in reference to the letter, and then I brought it down to a print shop and said, please scan this thing in, so I have one massive PDF. Why is it first? Just because that's the way it worked out.
Okay, I just didn't want to throw somebody off by the first conclusion they read that says they found no evidence of cancer linking to radio frequency. You know what I mean? I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
I might see if I can put it later on or something.
Well, the thing is, it's listed as an exhibit, and if you want to change it around, you can do that, but then you're going to have to know how to edit a PDF file. And part of the reason that I gave it as a PDF file is it's very hard for people to mess with it. Unless you have a PDF editor or a program to do it, you're going to have a hard time. And the reason I did that is I don't want people messing around with my evidence, my file. Because if I can say, hey, this was legal, and somebody says writes illegal, I've changed the whole context of my sentence. Legal versus illegal. In fact, I had a court do that once. But anyway, that's why it was PDF. So hopefully people don't monkey with it and screw it up.
Okay, well, I won't do anything with it. This is all the farther I've got into it so far, but if I read farther, does it say I'm guessing?
Yeah, it talks about, yep. If you read it, and I don't know if we're going to reconvene next week, that's up to you guys. But if you read into it next week, and you have a question on it, by all means, we'll answer it, or at least I'll try and answer it. And if I don't know the answer, I'll go find the answer.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, sir.
No problem. We're all in this rat race together. We just need to have more people in the rat race. Any other questions for you guys? It's 10:06, and we usually wrap this thing up about 10 o'clock or thereabouts. If anybody has a question, raise your hand.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
right, well, are we gonna, does anybody want to speak up to whether or not we want to meet tomorrow or next week, same time?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So now you're all notified, officially notified that there'll be a meeting on Tuesday. Bring all your friends.
All right, good night, everyone, or good morning.
Whichever the case may be. Thank you guys for showing up.
Mhm.
You. Good night.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
No problem.